God bless you, brothers and sisters, and welcome to week 2 of the Truth Squad. We want to bring you the truth from the inside sources, and as you've seen last week, this is not information you're going to get. This is not information that's going to come through the mainstream media. So stand with us as we stand with God in action in Jesus' name.
We have next a remarkable patriot, another military veteran, former Marine combat veteran. Robert Muse is his name. I'm extremely pleased that he could take a few minutes. He's got a busy day today, but a few minutes to talk with us about some of the litigation that he has been involved in with David Yerushalmi, defending freedom of religion, and defending groups like ours against the lawfare of those who are seeking to destroy Western civilization from within using stealthy techniques, not just the violent kind. Robert Muse, are you out there?
I am.
Wonderful.
Good
Welcome,
to be with you,
sir.
Frank.
So good to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I thank you for that little perimeter on the Council on American Islamic Relations. I would add to that they've been officially designated as a terrorist organization by the United Arab Emirates. Now, David Yerushalmi and I have been involved in a lot of litigation with CAIR, and I'm going to run through some of the highlights here so you can really see what type of an organization this truly is. You know, very interestingly, after 3 years of litigation against CAIR in a federal case in Washington, D.C., we uncovered facts demonstrating that CAIR has been running a global money laundering operation out of the nation's capital. This scheme was discovered by my colleague, David Yerushalmi, in the course of legal discovery and separate federal litigation arising out of allegation by 5 of CAIR's former clients, Muslim clients, whom David and I represented in this litigation against CAIR, who were defrauded by CAIR. You know, CAIR holds themselves out as a Muslim civil rights organization. Well, we uncovered during the course of discovery that these 5 clients were allegedly represented by a resident attorney. That's how he was described by CAIR in litigation. Well, come to find out, that resident attorney was not a licensed attorney, and no litigation was taking place at all on behalf of these CAIR clients who were defrauded and who lost out because they were expecting to have legal matters handled by them. And they weren't. And we filed the lawsuit against CAIR on their behalf. And it was interesting because CAIR was trying to pay off. They were trying to hide and cover up this conspiracy against these victims who were defrauded by CAIR and trying to pay off potential witnesses. Well, during the course of that litigation, which resulted in a settlement, the terms of which are confidential, and because CAIR refuses to disclose the nature of that settlement on behalf of our clients, but during the course of that litigation, we found out that when CAIR was initially established, they were established as a 501c4, a lobbying organization. And as a C4, there are stringent reporting requirements for the type of funds and the source of the funds that you receive, especially if the funds are in excess of $5,000. CAIR, however, had no intention of disclosing the fact that it was receiving millions of dollars from oil-rich Gulf Arabs, the same sources who were also financing the Muslim Brotherhood to prepare for the Arab Spring, and also were providing funds to operations in Iraq and Afghanistan on behalf of al-Qaeda. In fact, CAIR's expensive headquarters in the nation's capital was financed by a $1 million grant from a Saudi Arabian bank. At one point, CAIR even sought a $1 million grant from Libya's now dead strongman, Muammar Gaddafi, in an effort to distribute to Muslim Americans Qurans with an Islamist translation and commentary, together with Muslim Brotherhood literature. So to avoid these reporting requirements from these dubious Islamist sources, and to avoid registering as an agent of a foreign sovereign as required by federal law, CAIR created a separate company called the CAIR Foundation Incorporated to serve as an IRS-approved 501c3 charitable organization. So CAIR itself quit filing any federal tax returns from 2008 to 2010 and allowed the IRS to withdraw its status as a 501c4. converting it then into a for-profit corporation, which obviously when they receive money do not have to have these same reporting requirements. CAIR also stopped all of its operations and became simply a holding company, transferring at least on the books all of its employees and equipment to CAIR Foundation. The result is that CAIR received millions of dollars from foreign Islamist sources every year into their for-profit corporation. They would turn around then and provide those as money grants to CAIR Foundation. And because the only source of that money was from CAIR itself, it was never had to be disclosed what the actual source of those funds were. In effect, that is a money laundering operation. And again, that was discovered through the course of litigation where we represented 5 of CAIR's clients who were defrauded, who were told they were having their legal matters handled by CAIR, which again bills itself as a civil rights organization, and yet none of that in fact took place. In the case in Oklahoma, they actually had a board member of CAIR Oklahoma, an African-American veteran who was a Muslim, go to the gun range because these gun range owners as well pledged that they were not going to train the next Islamic terrorist at their gun range. And he showed up at the gun range. Everything was going fine. He was going to be allowed to shoot. And then when his plan wasn't working, they obviously CAIR wanted him to be denied service. He took a step back. He had a military-style weapon, shouldered a loaded firearm, handgun on his side. He stepped back into a ready position, put his hand over his sidearm, and he said, "I'm a Muslim. Is that a problem?" Well, of course, the gun range owners were fearing for their lives at that point. They calmed the situation down, and they told him he couldn't shoot today, and he left. They immediately got online, tried to figure out who this guy was, and come to find out he is a board member of CAIR. They realized this was a setup, and so they denied him service. Not only was he threatening to them the day that he showed up, but as a board member of CAIR, they're not going to allow any Islamic organization to train at their range who has ties to terrorism, as CAIR does. So we got sued. The Oklahoma gun range got sued. Our clients got sued by CAIR and the ACLU out of New York. They hired a giant law firm as well to come in and to sue the Oklahoma gun range. We successfully defeated their motion for a summary judgment, so the case was going to go to trial. And on the eve of trial, rather than having to put CAIR's nefarious ties to terrorism on trial, which is what we were intended to do, they just literally threw in the towel, filed a motion to dismiss with prejudice, and the lawsuit ended in favor of our clients.
People. We also have heard about the nature of CAIR as documented in case after case after case, in which its true nature as a political warfare instrument and engine for trying to promote Sharia supremacism, I think is the best way to describe it, in our country, is driving the Southern Poverty Law Center's data to be used by this Islamist Council on American Islamic Relations, tied to Hamas, tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, designated by a terrorist organization, I believe not just by the United Arab Emirates, but by others as well. We're going to turn now, in the context of this group, CAIR, using Southern Poverty Law Center fraudulent information to defame the chairman of the board of the Center for Security Policy, Miles Prentice, on the grounds that he works with an organization that has been vilified by the SPLC on their hate list. A colleague of ours, Jim Simpson, a former official in the Office of Management and Budget, an investigative reporter, a very impressive author. So Jim Simpson, tell us about the agenda of CAIR as it relates specifically to those who are working with organizations like ours.
Thank you very much, Frank, and thanks for having me here today. I want to add to what you said about the council. They bill themselves as a tax-exempt social welfare organization under the auspices of the IRS 501c3 code. The Council on American Islamic Relations is not a social welfare organization. It is an extremist organization dedicated to first undermining and destroying its enemies and then pushing the supremacist agenda that Frank identified as Sharia supremacy. And they collude in this effort with a broad range of leftist organizations, communist organizations, to vilify, marginalize, and financially destroy those organizations that are specifically calling them out on those agendas. You have to get that straight. That is exactly what they are doing. That's exactly what they're about. Nothing more and nothing less. At the very least, CAIR should be stripped of its 501c3 tax-exempt status, and those investigations, which were ongoing prior to the election of President Barack Obama, who shut them down, should be restarted, and CAIR should be investigated both for its ties and support of terrorism and for its subversive agenda in the United States. And hopefully I can explain a little bit more of how they're doing that in the time that I have allotted. I have to add that this, Jerry Boykin, Lieutenant General Boykin, talked at length about the Southern Poverty Law Center, but I want to add something to that. The Southern Poverty Law Center has worked with communists since its inception, and its hate agenda was taken directly from a strategy designed, created, and articulated by the German communist named Herbert Marcuse. And Herbert Marcuse created this concept called partisan tolerance, which was partisan tolerance of ideas from the left and complete intolerance of ideas from those opposing the left. And that intolerance includes law-breaking, violence, for example, today's Antifa, and doing everything possible to silence opposition voices. And Marcuse himself was merely echoing what first Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin said in 1917. Listen to this. He said, "We must be ready to employ trickery, deceit, law-breaking, withholding and concealing truth. We can and must write in a language which sows hate, revulsion, and scorn towards those who disagree with us." Isn't that what we are seeing writ large with the left today? This is the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate agenda, specifically brought to them by Herbert Marcuse, who worked closely for many years with Southern Poverty Law Center co-founder Julian Bond, and who came up with the entire idea of shutting down ideas that the left opposes. Now, CAIR recently came out with a report. It's called Hijacked by Hate, American Philanthropy and the Islamophobia Network. Now, what exactly is Islamophobia? Because, you know, who knows what they're talking about here? It sounds like they're talking about anybody that expresses bigoted hate towards Muslims, but that's really not the definition. The definition, let me read some of the definitions to you. They include, if you issue the words Islamic terrorism, Islamist terrorism, jihadism, Islamic jihadism, Sharia-supremacism, if you so much as mention these words, you are an Islamophobe, a bigot, and a hater, and you need to shut up. That is their message. And this report, which they co-authored with the Southern Poverty Law Center, is so fraught with falsehoods and inaccuracies, it would be funny if so many mainstream media organizations didn't just take it without criticism as gospel truth. But it's absurd if you look into it. For example, they talk about 39 xenophobic organizations which together take in billions of dollars from a dark network of funders and what they call donor-advised funds, which don't require donors to name themselves. Of those 39, well, first of all, in order to get $1 billion in this example they provide, they have to add up all of these 39 organizations. Oh, but wait, it's not 39 organizations. It's actually 46 organizations. They miscounted. They have to add up their revenues for 3 years. But even more important than that, 2/3 of all of those revenues are earned by the Christian broadcasting networks. That is Pat Robertson's 700 Club. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't think of the oldest, largest Christian broadcasting network in the nation being an Islamophobe, taking dark money from evil foundations. It's a joke. If you take out that one organization which covers every type of issue there is in the news, if you take it out, the remaining organizations earn on average about $3 million a year. Some of them earn less than $100,000 a year. Jerry referred to an organization that the Southern Poverty Law Center counts as 500 organizations. That would be Act for America. Well, all of those 500 organizations are voluntary. Act for America itself, in its latest tax return, showed receipts of $125,000. Now, if those other vastly funded 500 Islamophobic organizations were to get some of that money, they'd have to get $257 each per year. So the whole idea is a joke. Meanwhile, CAIR does not mention the kind of money it makes. Oh, and I would also add, they single out 6 of those organizations that they particularly can't stand, which includes the Center for Security Policy, the American Freedom Law Center, and a few others. And they claim that these groups collectively make $18 million a year. Well, the only way they do that is to add up almost 10 years of revenues for all those organizations. Meanwhile, what does CAIR take in annually? Well, guess what? It takes in by itself over $14 million a year, and it claims $11 million in assets, which is more than the collection of the other 6 do in fact. And CAIR does not mention that the Washington Trust Foundation, run by the very same guy who defines Islamophobia, Issam Omish, one of the founders of the Dar al-Hijra Mosque in Falls Church, which has harbored Islamic terrorists. Can we say Islamic terrorism? No, we're Islamophobes. He runs the Washington Trust Foundation, which has an additional $5 million in real estate assets owned by CAIR, but CAIR doesn't mention that. So even the amounts that they do have show on the books are not accurate. These are just a few examples of the kind of fraudulent accounting they engage in to vilify and dox their enemies. And the worst part of it is, in this report, they go after these donor-advised funds, and they claim that this dark network of Islamophobes take money from these donor-advised funds like Schwab, Proteus, Fidelity. Well, guess what? So does the Council on American Islamic Relations and almost every one of its other Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the United States. And collectively, they, along with their left-wing allies, are a multi-billion-dollar network. When you put together the assets of CAIR, Islamic Circle of North America, Muslim American Society, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and others, $1.6 billion in assets in 1 year. You don't have to add up years to get to that. So their entire narrative is fraudulent, and people need to understand this. They have no legitimate seat at the table. If they were really moderate Muslims, as they claim, they would be standing shoulder to shoulder with Frank Gaffney and General Boykin and others like them against this Islamic extremist terrorist agenda. But instead, they engage in lawfare and other unsavory practices to shut down anybody that brings that to light or criticizes them in any way. As far as I'm concerned, they're a domestic terrorist group as well. Thank you.